You. It's all about
Me. Can you guys hear me in the back?
Yes.
Everybody hear me? Hello, testing. Thank you for coming out tonight. Welcome everybody to San Diego Writers Inc. How many people is it their first time here? Oh, wow, a lot of people. Welcome. We like the youthful set that has been brought in tonight. New, fresh blood. My name is Rob Williams. I'm the program director here at San Diego Writers Inc. I say that every time I get up here at the microphone. It's I don't know. I like to say it, but I'm trying to think of funny things to say tonight because it's hard to say funny things when it's such a special night and we have such special readers performing and reading here at San Diego Writers Inc. On this amazing weekend, the Dangerous Writing Weekend. So I am going to just start because I want to leave it to the readers to kind of impress and awe us. But we're going to start with Angie Vorhees. She's from the class of 2010 Dangerous Writing. And Angie has worked as a nurse's aide in Germany. She's taught English in China and delivered pizza in New Jersey. She's a poet, translator, photographer, soccer player, and a co-founder of San Diego Roots Sustainable Food Project. And she is here to read for us tonight.
Thanks, Rob. I'm so excited to see Sage and Tom again and people from the class, and I'm honored that you asked me to read. So tonight I'm going to read to you from a novel that I'm writing. It's what you need to know is it's set in the late 80s in Garden City, Kansas, which is a city in western Kansas known mostly for having one of the largest meat packing plants in the country, and also for the large number of immigrants that have settled there to work as cheap labor for the plant. The book centers around a family. The mother's name is Lily, and she's a Vietnamese refugee who came to Garden City in the late 70s after the war. Does this sound okay? It sounds a little echoey. Okay. And she came to Garden City in the late 70s, and she met her husband Tom, who grew up on a farm there and is now a social worker. Lily owns a Chinese restaurant in town, and she works about 80 hours a week there. And much of the story is told from the point of view of Willow, her youngest daughter, their youngest daughter. Lily was always working down at the restaurant, so Tom was the one who stayed home with the girls when they were sick. Tom was the one who carried food over to Mrs. Bartleby's house after her hip surgery. And after her daughter Sarah went back to Michigan, it was Tom who drove her to church on Sundays and took her trash can to the curb each Monday before he left for work. It was Tom who forgot to add all the items to the check when the Gonzalez family came into the restaurant to eat. They couldn't afford to eat out, not with 6 kids to feed on Mrs. Gonzalez's salary. She worked as a lunch lady down at the high school during the day, and at night she cleaned offices. Tom had gotten to know Pilar after Alberto, her husband, had been injured down at the IBP plant. His sleeve had caught on one of the saw blades as he pushed a side of beef forward into the cutter. The machine had taken his arm right in with the meat, unable to distinguish between one kind of flesh and another. Instead of a clean cut, his steel mesh sleeve had jammed the motor, and Alberto's arm hung there, caught between the blade and the belt. Torn bits of flesh ripped from the bone, his blood pouring onto the other carcasses and down to the floor. His co-workers leapt forward and tried to pull him free. Jesus Diaz hit the safety button and shut down the line, then stayed by his side until the ambulance came. The motor had to be taken apart and reversed before the remainder of Alberto's arm could be freed. Because he had no health insurance and no green card, the INS sent him back to Mexico as soon as the ER doctors stitched him back up. He promised Pilar he would return to Garden City as soon as he could save up enough money to pay the smuggler to get him back across. But 2 months after he left, Pilar got the phone call from his aunt in Guadalajara. Alberto was dead. His arm had never healed properly, and upon his return to Mexico, had gotten infected, and the infection continued to eat its way through him until it reached his heart. I have no pictures of my mother when she was a child. In my history textbook, there's a photograph of a Vietnamese girl running down the street naked after Agent Orange burned off all of her clothes. But I have no photograph of my mother before I was born, except for her identity card. That photo, taken in the camp in Atlanta, shows her holding a sign in front of her chest with an ID number and her Vietnamese name, Yen Huy Q. My mother had a long, thin neck and petite frame. Everything about her was small, except her personality and her stomach. She would slap her round belly and say, so fat. You think I have another baby? And then she would stare at me with that intense, wide-eyed look of hers, so I never knew if she was serious or not until she laughed. And then she would laugh and laugh at me, at herself, at life. I never knew which. I loved my mother's laugh. She laughed with her whole body, with the whole world watching. A deep, throaty laugh that turned heads, that made people stop and wonder what was so funny. It drew people toward her. They wanted to be a part of that, to be in on the joke that my mother was always telling. I have no idea what my grandmother looked like, or my grandfather, or anyone on my mother's side. It's like an invisible wall, a wall that must have windows and doors somewhere, some way of getting in, but I can't see where they are. My mother has the key, but she keeps that hidden too. So I have to feel my way around in the dark. Sometimes Ma and I will be talking about something like, I don't know, my favorite food when I was a baby, rice. And then I'll ask her, what did you eat when you were a baby? Or I'll be listening to the radio and hear a song and ask, Ma, what was that lullaby you used to sing to me? Something about a princess who lived by the water? Then Ma gets that look in her eyes. The silk curtain, I call it. Her brown eyes flicker back and forth and then go very still. All the light goes out of them. And then she's gone, behind the silk curtain, and I'm here on the outside, alone. Whose story is right? Kim and I grew up in the same house, and yet when I try to tell the story about the Christmas tree catching on fire when I was 10, Kim will interrupt me and say, that's not the way it happened. There are so many things I have forgotten. The stories I remember best are the ones I read over and over again. Anne Frank hiding from the Nazis. Whose story is that? Is that hers or mine? Because when I read it, Anne is me. Or is she my mother hiding from the Viet Cong? My mother won't tell me her stories, but she does sing to me old Vietnamese folk songs and epic poems that she's memorized. She recites for me the story of Q, for whom she was named. It's a very famous poem, she tells me. You want to understand your country? Listen. Ma, that's not my country. America's my country. She tries to explain the story, something about a beautiful woman who sells herself in order to save her family. But I don't get it. It's like a soap opera from 200 years ago, full of emperors and mistresses. Yeah, what do you know about love? Ma, it's a boring story, I tell her, and go back to reading my Stephen King. In the dream, my mother comes to me. She floats into my room like a ghost, only she's not wearing white, for that is the color of death, and she has seen far too much of that to pay it open tribute. No, she comes in wearing a green nightgown with yellow rings. Or is it yellow with blue rings? In the way of dreams, as in life, she changes constantly. Even her colors change, her hair going from ebony to bone white before my eyes. Her hair growing, getting longer and longer, rising and writhing down across my covers like snakes. Ma, what are you doing? I ask. She does not answer. Where are you going? My hands are cold, but when I reach for hers, she pulls back. A serpentine lock descends and winds itself around my arm. My mother turns to her companions waiting in the doorway. A rat, a dragon, a monkey. Outside my window, the sky flames red. Can I come with you? She shakes her head, and the snakes recoil against her scalp. Cats cannot cross water, she tells me, and then she's gone. My mother often came into my room at night after she had closed the restaurant. I awoke with her legs wrapped around me, her arms cradling my head tightly against her neck. The overripe smell of her breath, like durian fruit, filled the room. I tried to extricate myself, but her arms were wrapped so tightly around my chest, it was like we were one body. That night, she did not come into my room. That morning, did she stop by my room at all? Did she stand beside my bed, stroke my hair, kiss my cheek? Did she even say goodbye? Or did she just walk straight ahead as she always did, intent on getting where she was going, never turning around to see who was following her? That morning before dawn, I could see her walking straight out the door, getting into the car and driving off, not noticing me in the window, where I would have gone to use the bathroom and seen her note. Then I would have woken my dad, and he would have stopped her. but I didn't. In my groggy state, I missed the note entirely, as I kept the light off when I peed at night. I liked it dark. Liked to pretend I was a blind person feeling my way through the room. In the dark, I knew every step. My hand glided along the smooth tile counter. I could turn and know where the toilet was by the feel of cold porcelain against my calf. I wouldn't have heard anything that morning except the sounds of my own body, pee, breath, pulse. Or maybe I slept right through her leaving, only dreamed her coming into my room, dreamed seeing her walk down the hallway, hearing the side door click closed behind her. But in the morning there it was, propped against the mirror, a note written on the back of a receipt. Willow, it said, in my mother's childish handwriting. Help Daddy, Ma.